Well, he sort of had it right. After tonight, I will tell you I'm not stuck back there, because if y'all felt God's presence like I felt in that little room back there, you'd be beating me out of there for it, because it's amazing. Half the time I feel like I'm in a swimming pool back there, just floating through God's glory, and it is outstanding. So I put a video up the other day inviting people, and tonight God's given me something, and it's called A Conversation with the King, and I'm not going to talk more about it. I'm just going to get into it. So, Bill, hit me dots. Is it time, Dad? It's almost time. The Spirit's there. It's almost time. I'm so excited. I can't wait for this, for what you've got planned in store. I know, son. I can't either. So is it time now, Dad? Yeah, it's time. Let there be light. Wow. You did all this? All this. What are those? I call them stars. Wow. There's millions and millions. What are the other ones called? They're planets. You see that one right there? That's the one I'm giving you, son. You're giving it to me? You see, it's not ready yet because I haven't spoken it. But that's yours. That's where your people are going to be. That's where your kingdom is going to be. That's where your people are going to worship you and lift you up. But is it going to look like that? No, son. See, we have to make it. I have to make it. The Spirit's there. He's hovering over the water. Now all I have to do is speak your world into existence. So we create the day. We create the night. We create the dry land. Dry land. We walk on crystal seas here. They have to walk on dry land. But we have water for them. It's not quite the water that we have here, but it'll get them through. Get who through? Your people. It's your people that I'm building this for. It's ultimately you that I'm building this for, son. Wow. Thanks, Dad. I can't. Thank you. And so God goes on to create the earth. He creates the heavens. He creates all the animals. He creates Adam. And he puts them in this beautiful garden where they can live and walk in harmony with God. My son goes and he walks with them in the day. He walks through the trees. He converses with the people that I call humans, that I made out of dirt with my own hands. The man and the woman. Together as one in perfect harmony. But one of my angels didn't like the fact that I created these people, that I put my love into these people, that I put my spirit into them, because I created them to be like me. I created them to be like my son, and he didn't like it. So one day, my son goes to walk with them, and he goes, Adam, where are you, Adam? I can't find you. I just want to talk. I want to walk with you. Adam and his bride are hiding. They say they're ashamed because they're naked. I didn't build the concept of shame into them, so I know something's happened. One of my creations, one of my angels has come down and tried to interfere with my creation. He tried to ruin what I built in love for my son and for these creatures that I love called humans. But he didn't know what I know. He didn't know what I saw before I said, "Let there be light." Because he's only a creation. I'm the best dad. So, things happen as they do with humans sometimes, and we have to change. They had to be moved out of the garden. But I still had not given up hope. I gave them things to do, ways to be holy, to still commune with me. And because of my creation, because of the angel, they just kept failing. They kept failing me. And I would sit on my throne and I would watch as my creation tried their best to be me. They would build towers to try to reach me. They would build statues to try to emulate me. They would come up with doctrines that would try to eliminate me. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know what I saw coming. And I created this whole world for them. I would build in fail-safes. I would say, you have to work to eat. You will earn your meal by the sweat of your brow, but I gave them the opportunity to earn their meal. Because I wanted these little balls of my spirit, these little capsules of me to succeed. Because if they succeed for me, then they'll succeed for him. But then, as usual, they stray away. There are great giants that roam the land. Some may call them titans. Some would call them men great like Hercules, big, strong, proud men who could move mountains with their hands. But I created them so that they would not have to have a mountain to move. So I sit from my throne and I watch my creation as these great creatures who are so evil and dark try to ruin my earth. And I get angry. And I want to swipe them all out and start over again. I weep because there's no one left on this tiny planet that I made for my son who has any good left in him. But as I search and I look and I try to find one last bit of hope, I find one man and his family. And I tell him, build a boat. Now, it hadn't rained in a long time. So the people mock him. They call him names. They downgrade him. But they don't know what I know. So when the boat's built, I tell him, okay, bring 2 of every animal. He says, okay. He gets the animals on board. I shut the door. I send the flood. And I destroy my own creation. And I sit on my throne. And I feel such pain. These creatures that I made to live with me, to walk with me, to not have to work a hard day in their life, I have to wipe off of my earth. The boat comes to rest, and Noah and his family come out, and we move on. And there's 1,900 years between the flood and the end of what would eventually come to be known as the Old Testament. 1,910 years where my angel, who I had to throw out of my home, who I loved, who I created to bring such beautiful music and to be such a beautiful creature who rebelled against me, would come against me and my people. He would try to convince them I wasn't real. He would try to kill them. Every time I would raise a man up, he would swoop in to try to cut them down. Through exiles, through enslavement, through battles, through wars, through famine, through death. But he didn't know what I knew. And then there comes a time of 440 years where there was no one. There was no one on this home that I created for my people, for my son's people. It was built to be a perfection, ruled over by him. And there was no one. For 440 years, my light did not shine in this world. That all changed one day with a man named John. They called him a wild man. He wore clothes made of camel hair. He ate locusts. He stayed out in the desert. He had a long beard, and people said he was crazy. I like crazy. But they didn't know what I knew. Because during that 440 years, with my son at my side, I had to make the hardest decision a father could ever make. Because I knew that the only way that my people could come back to me was to send my child. And I wasn't just sending him to the earth. I was sending him to be slaughtered like an animal. I was sending him to be beat, to be whipped, to be spit upon, to be laughed at. I was sending my son so that in 3 days, after being alive for only 33 years, he would go from being welcomed as a king to beat like a common animal. And I had to sit on my throne. And I had to go, son, we've tried everything. I've given your people every chance, every opportunity. You have to go. This will be the hardest thing that I've ever had to see. But I will be with you every step of the way. Because you're my son. And you will be enough. So I sent one of my angels to meet this little girl named Mary, and there was nothing special about Mary. She was just like any other. I still remember watching the day that my angel went to her and said, "You're going to have a son. And you're going to have my son." She felt so unworthy. But I wouldn't have chosen her if she wasn't. I wouldn't have sent my son if she wasn't. And I knew the way she would be treated, because Mary wasn't married yet. And to be pregnant was very unacceptable. And I knew she would be mocked, and she would be ridiculed, she would be belittled, she would be disowned by her own family. But they didn't know what I knew. And so my son is born. And these wise men, these men, they come to see my son. They bring him gifts. They needed some help, so I put a special star in the sky just for them. Because, as I know from experience, humans tend to lose their way. And they come to my child and they give him gifts. And I'm so proud. I get to see my son bring his people together. He goes about his life, and he was a fairly normal child. I mean, for the Savior of the world. He did some things that frankly baffled people. He taught the teachers at the age of 12. I was proud of him for that one. These humans that I created who thought they knew so much, and here they were, brought down to the level of a 12-year-old. You know, there was no humility in them that day, though, unfortunately. Because at this point, they thought they were better than that. They thought they spoke for God. Some of them thought they were God. They didn't know what I knew. He goes forth on his mission and on his journey to this sad, sad day that I know is coming and that he knows coming. And every step closer, every step he took was a step closer to his death. He knew that. He never lost hope. He never lost vision, and he never lost strength. Because even though he was a human, he spoke for his daddy. He spoke with my power. He spoke with my love. He spoke with my healing. And then we come to one of the hardest days I've ever had to face in my life. My son is meeting with his friends. He's having dinner. One of his friends turns his back on him. He knows what's coming. And he goes out to the garden. And he kneels down. And he prays. And he prays and he prays. And he prays so hard that he begins to bleed. And he begs me to take this from him. He fears that he may not be strong enough to handle it. And I have to look down at him and I'll tell him, son, you don't know what I know. And he's arrested. And he goes before the supposed wise men of his day, who were more interested in power than learning of me and living for me. There I am, in human body, standing before them. And they mock me. And they hit me. They spit at me. They curse at me. They don't know what I know. And I have to watch my son be flogged until his back is split open. And you can see his bones. He's hit in the face until he's no longer recognizable as a person anymore. They pull out his beard by the handful. They take a crown made out of thorny bushes and they place it on his head. But not gingerly like most people think. Because then they take a rod and they beat it onto his head. And then they take and they find him a purple robe. And they place it on his back, where the blood would begin to dry into it and make it stick to his internal organs and his bones, just so they could rip it off and watch him cry in anguish. And I wanted to come down off my throne, and I wanted to stop these people. But as much as it hurt me to watch them do this to my son, watching all my people be separated from me for eternity was much more painful. And I had to watch as they drove spikes into his hands and into his feet. And I had to watch as they lift him up, and as the cross goes into the ground and hits the bottom, and his joints separate. And I had to hear him cry and scream for me. And I wanted to come down off my throne with 1,000 legions of angels, and I wanted to just sweep him away. And the devil laughed. He didn't know what I knew. And I saw my son hanging, bleeding, gasping for breath. doing everything he could to hold on. Meanwhile, they're throwing dice for his clothes. And I watched my son hang. He could have given up his spirit at any time and been back home with me. But he waited. And he waited. Because there was a man hanging next to him. And he wanted to believe. And as my son hung there, he began to realize who he was next to. And my son waited in agony and anguish long enough for one more person to believe. And as I sat there on my throne, for the first time in his life, I heard my son refer to me not as Father, but as God. Because at that moment, I couldn't be by his side. At that moment, he was becoming normal. He was becoming human. He had taken on all the sin of every human on the planet that had ever lived and ever would. And I couldn't be a part of that. Because I'm so holy that in the old days, if there was the smallest sin in my presence, it would get burned up. If a priest had the smallest sin, he would be evaporated. I had to turn my holiness from my son, because he would have, and my sacrifice would have never been made. My people would have never been able to come to me in a new way. And I watched my son call me God, not Father. Like I was a stranger. And it broke me inside. And I wanted to sweep down off my throne, and I wanted to save him. I wanted to take him off of there. I wanted to hold him and just fix him. But the thought of not giving my people a way back to me hurt me worse than what was happening to my son. So he lets the Spirit go. But he doesn't come home yet because he's still got work to do. And I'd created a place for my deceiving angel that had rebelled against me, and he had made a nice little home for himself there and surrounded himself with followers and people that would build him up and make him think that he was so great and wonderful. He didn't know what I knew. My son walked up to the gates, snatched the lock off, and walked in. 3 days, he stayed there. When he came back, he had what he had come to earth for. The keys to keep my people out of the grave. The keys to keep my people away from death. And the keys to keep my people out of hell. And so for 3 days, his followers were so sad and heartbroken because their God had gone. Their rabbi had gone. Their teacher had gone. They didn't know what I know. And on the third day, one of the ladies came to check on him. He wasn't there. Sitting on my throne as I watched her approach his tomb, and as I watched the look on her face, I couldn't wait to hear how the news was received. That he wasn't there anymore. And he appeared to many people during that time. Some didn't believe him at first. Some had to have signs. I had to tell one of my men, throw your nets on the other side. And then I made a meal for him. But he didn't come back alone. He brought back many people with him. And after he had done his teaching, he took his men and he gathered them on a hill. And he told them things were going to be a little different. He wouldn't be here anymore. And they despaired because they thought that meant that I wouldn't be there anymore. They didn't know what I knew. So, my son has gone through this brutal torture. He's been killed, and he comes back as an ultimate victor. And he spends 40 days with his people. And then he finally comes back where he belongs. And he sits down at my right hand. Because his work was done. But my work wasn't. And so I began preparing and setting things in motion. And I sent the Holy Spirit. Because unlike Jesus, who couldn't be everywhere at one time, he could. And he gave my people a new hope, a new way of experiencing me and my love. Because when my son was on the earth, he spoke with my authority. He spoke with my power. He spoke with my peace and my love. But now, they all can. No matter where the person comes from, no matter what their life has been, they speak for the Father. They speak for their daddy. They speak with my power. You know, it's kind of funny that after all that Satan still hasn't learned his lesson. He's causing wars and division over skin color and how much money you make and what kind of car you drive and where you live. And it saddens me because I sit on my throne and I watch as my creation begins to tear itself apart. And I know he's down there and I know he's laughing. He's living it up. He's having fun. He's making the world in his image. He don't know what I know. He doesn't know that there's a day that's coming where he's going to have to stand in front of my throne and he's going to have to answer for every life he's destroyed, every child who's gone hungry, every family that's been torn apart. And he's going to have to answer for his crimes. From the beginning of time till now, there's been many ups and downs in my people's life. I've always had a plan. I've never faltered. My people may have lost hope. My people may have lost sight and vision and focus. I've never faltered. When you have problems, sometimes you get weak and you blame me. That's okay. I'm strong enough to handle it. When you blame me, it doesn't lie on me. When you blame me, when you get angry, when your world's falling apart and you shake your fist at me and go, why aren't you here and why don't you care? It doesn't land on me. It lands on the crossbar of a cross that held my son. You're only human. It happens. Times get rough. Sometimes there's not enough provision. Sometimes there's not a job. Sometimes your whole world seems to fall apart. But you don't know what I know. When God gave me this message, when God gave me this, I was very nervous, I guess would be the right word, because this is, as far as I know, this is the first time it's been presented like this in this church. And I was like, God, it's so weird and it's so different. God said, that's why I chose you. And then the other night, it's okay to have an altar call, right? The other night I had a dream, and I don't know who this is for, but my entire message tonight was that through all of history, God has called to us. He's provided way after way after way. And in my dream, I saw somebody. And they were standing at the end of a football field. They were waist deep in quicksand. Their arms were outstretched, and they were completely covered in thick rope vines. And at the other end of the football field, I saw Jesus. And he was calling to whoever this was. And I'm not saying it's one particular person. And he was saying, I know you've been stuck. I've seen you struggle. I've seen you try to overcome and fail. But you tried to do it on your own. I see what you're struggling with. And you feel so bound up. You're in quicksand. You're covered in you're covered in vines because you're stuck. You've been stuck here for so long. That the devil has told you that nothing you can do can break it. But if you will take the first step of just asking, the vines will begin to break. The quicksand will begin to dry. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough. But it's going to be tough because you're following after me. And that's not how this world is set up anymore. If you take your first step, put aside your pride. Put aside your thoughts of what church is supposed to be like, how a church member is supposed to be, or what a church may think of you. If you will put that aside, and you will take that first step of just asking. He said, I'll burn the vines off. I'll dry up the quicksand, and you'll be walking on solid ground again.